Hello and welcome to another episode of 𝗀𝗽𝘁 Suite. And we're delighted to have a very special guest with us today. Mellisa Colling, well, she is what we call a guru in people engagement. She's got project management skill. She's a big believer in collaboration and that entrepreneurs are going to lead the way to changing the world. So something I resonate with greatly. Welcome, Mel, to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
And we thought we'd have you as a guest today because we've got a topic which has been sent to us, which we think is a really interesting one to get your take on as a starting point, which is about performance and project management to engage both local and remote teams. And I think that's something that's become more and more prevalent these days, particularly since, pandemic times and teams are not necessarily sitting in a co-location. And of course, the growing popularity of teams that are spread overseas, whether you're just employing people in places like the Philippines and Thailand, or whether indeed you're a global type business. And so you actually do have full offices in other locations around the world. So it's a big topic. So I'm interested just initially, what has been your experience in terms of how that engagement strategy has had to be a key focus for businesses?
Yeah, it's been really interesting with the whole COVID pandemic and how businesses have had to shift and change. Being a project manager, and my background's in project management, we've always had remote teams. As a project manager, you're always managing remote teams, whether they're, off-site locally or they're overseas. And so for me, that wasn't any different, but for lots of businesses, it was actually a new way of working. And they actually weren't set up to do that. So, technology was one thing that they had to get their head around. But the second thing, once you've got everybody set up, is how do you get all those people working together where normally you're able to do that face-to-face a bit easier, but actually doing it remotely is really tricky. So the stuff that I talk about and the things that, I help businesses with is around engaging people. And the first thing about doing that is actually understanding all the people that you have on your team, but not just understanding them as in they've got this skill to do this job, which is normally what we think about when we're in business and we're asking people to come in the office and do a job. I think COVID opened up that, there is a whole person behind that person that comes to work to do a job. And, we're all seeing everybody's, backgrounds and their home life and stuff coming to the fore, when we're all on Zoom these days. But actually understanding how that person operates. And so for me, I got involved in profile testing, many, many years ago. And that's just a tool to actually understand how people operate. And so once you can understand how a person operates, communicates, leads, then you can adjust the way that you communicate and deal with that person. And if you have a team of people and they're all different styles, you as the leader need to, change the way that you communicate and deal with those people. And so just having that little insight into how people tick makes it so much easier to manage people both in the office and remotely.
Yeah, I think the interesting part about remote teams is firstly the idea that it is part of a team. People used to talk about other offices or virtual staff, but I think that whole idea of team is a bit of a game changer, and it's a game changer in the way you're in, particularly in terms of the way the systems you have to implement are, because it's not as easy as having a conversation sitting next to someone. Team meetings take on a different dynamic, and the way you engage with the team and pass things on has changed as a result, hasn't it?
Yes, that's true. Systems play a very important role, especially when managing remote people. You need even more systems. You need monitoring system. You need more precise KPI system, which gives you better transparency. You need a communication system, more efficient communication system, rather than just talking to each other. And as you know, from my experience, I spent lots of time in IT as well, developing systems from small business to government agencies. And at one point, I analyzed lots of projects that I was participating in the past. And I realized that some projects went pretty well and they stick well and they were very smooth. And some were there was a high level of resistance, and I started to analyze what was the difference. And the difference was people, the purpose and people, two things that drive people to resist the change. So yeah, this is one of the most important things. And from systems perspective, sometimes it's a question. Sometimes you need right people to fit the system. Sometimes you need the system to fit right people. You can't shape everyone to the same thing.
I think the interesting thing as well that comes as a side note to that, and I want to bring Pierre into the discussion, is terms of asset management, because now it's sort of, you used to have things very centralized, so you were worried about, you know, equipment and things that were in a really centralized place. Now you've got this decentralized workforce, if you like, and the tools that people need for engagement are also changing. You know, you're fitting people with laptops and cameras and microphones and making sure you're on top of all of that. So there's an investment in that as well. And of course, there's a trust factor because people are taking it from home and largely working almost completely from home in many cases.
Anthony, yes, I think from as Mel initially said, once people moved from out of the office into that remote workplace, there was an initial cost of setup for a lot of the companies where, like I say, we had to effectively equip people with laptops, with cameras, make sure that their workplace met all the required health and safety. You know, people lying on the bed all day is not really ideal. So you've got to set people up in some kind of office or table or desk environment where they can work, where it's conducive to work. I think that initial cost of setup was sometimes a bit difficult for a lot of businesses. I know one of my customers had kind of they struggled initially to get everything going because they were set up to work mostly from a central office. They changed the methodology, and I mean now that they've gone through it for them and for the management there, they definitely see it as it's been for the better. The guys can work remotely. They get a lot more productivity out of the people, and what they are now looking at is actually reducing their office space, and then that will then be a significant cost reduction for them overall. So I think thinking about it in a smart way makes it a lot easier for businesses to get kind of to manage, like I said, manage those assets, but make sure that what they've got is actually useful for the person, how they've set it up is being used effectively. And then the management side of it, in terms of saying we need to measure outputs, not necessarily hours spent. And that I think was a big change for a lot of businesses right at the very beginning as well.
Yeah, and I think also there's a maintenance factor with things as well that you have to take care of in terms of financially. But Uri, I know there's a lot there to unpack in terms of making sure that process is right, because that it all gets back to engagement, doesn't it? I mean, everything has to be functioning in synergy.
That's right. And I've got a question to Mel, because Pierre touched on very, very important point on the people's productivity at home. And this is a double-edged sword to me, because at home, when you're in the office, you have nothing to do but work, right? At home, you've got so many distractions here. You've got your hobbies, you've got your family, you've got your dog who wants to just be taken out, right? I'm lucky. My hobbies are very, very noisy. I can't do anything at night. This is why at night I am very productive. But for lots of people, there is a lot to do at home, right? Mel, my question is how to change people's attention to work when they in the environment of permanent distraction, I would say.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and different people will do really well at home because in the office they're really distracted. So, and different, we come back to profiling. For me, if I go in an office, I love to have a chat. So I'm really distracted in an office. Whereas if I'm working from home, I can just focus and get stuff done. But I can't do it for too long because I get a bit bored with my own company and I need to go out and see people again. So that's where I've really struggled, during COVID and lockdown, is to have that interaction and that social, kind of networking connection element to work. Whereas other people that, really need to focus and, have that clear headspace and that quiet time, have really liked working from home. But as you say, Uri, there's lots of distractions as well. And I think it's trying to find that balance between home and work. And yes, you can multitask when you're at home, but also you're taking away travel time and, all that time that you would have, so-called wasted getting to and from work, that, you can now do other things at home. But it's really about understanding how you work. Like you said, Yuri, you work best at night. Some people are night owls and they work best at night. And I think the old 9 to 5 is really, from the industrial age when, we were manufacturing and we had to go to a place and we had to do the work and then we come home. We've really seen now in COVID that, that isn't really applicable. People have different times when they're more productive and we should support them to do that where it's possible. Obviously we have core work times and if you've got to shop for clients and things like that, but it's about having some boundaries, but being a little bit flexible as well, but going to understanding people. And what you were saying before, Pierre, about, investment in technology to work remotely, people are most businesses' biggest asset. And so we need to continue to invest in the people, like to use the technology, to use the systems, to understand themselves, to work better so they're more productive and they love coming to work, and they know that they're doing something of purpose, like Yuri said. And if we can get all those things working together, then it's so much easier, to run our business and have a happy and productive team.
Mel, I wanted to ask you as well, because there's the flip side of that. The water cooler chat is something that has some value, right? Because that social element is important in terms of how you engage with other team members. And in an physical office environment, it's quite easy because you're there and conversations can start. But you have to be a lot more proactive in trying to do that and find that opportunity to relate to one another and to share those incidental conversations, because in many offices they're quite critical. Of course, some of us as consultants have kind of avoided that water cooler chat, and that's the value of consultants, right? Because we're not involved in that, and that can work really well as well. But for businesses with teams of whatever size, that finding opportunities for interactivity and engagement is really important. Have you got any particular things that you've seen that have worked quite nicely for teams?
Yeah, look, there's been some really cool things that people have been doing, over COVID, trying to get that connection and that interaction happening. And as you say, that ad hoc kind of conversation around the water cooler that you kind of don't get when you're on Zoom. But, companies have been doing like trivia days and different experiences where they're trying to get everybody involved. Now that suits some people and it doesn't suit other people, but they're trying all these different things to try and engage different people on different levels and having kind of a social element to it, because that's the bit that's missing, isn't it? We're all busy working, meeting all of our deadlines and KPIs and all that kind of stuff, but we're forgetting to, have a break and have fun. The other thing that people have been doing is just having Zoom on while they're working. And if they're working teams normally, or they're in, a certain location where they would normally yell out to each other or ask something, they're actually just online working away. And if someone needs to ask a question, they're there. So they're kind of recreating that kind of feel of the office, but doing it, trying to find a way where it's possible. And one of those things is, just having Zoom on for certain periods of time to see whether they can get that interaction happening, and they've had success in doing that. So I think all the innovation that's come out of this is really cool.
I think what's interesting as well is that virtual those virtual staff that people used to refer to just as virtual assistants and used to, I guess, separate themselves from the team. This has allowed them to become more engaged and part of it, because they're no different. Whether the person is around the corner in the next state or overseas doesn't really matter anymore. And I think that integration has been key. But I did want to ask you one other question as well, just in relation to the skills that you've got around project management, because engagement is one thing, but project management is another, in terms of that handing off of things and making sure things are done. Have you seen that various tools that you can use for that, and having someone who's overseeing the project management become a much more critical role in the way the businesses have had to adapt to this new environment?
Absolutely. And I love project management and I've been doing it for a long time. But just the whole having a plan, it's no longer that you can just come in the office and say, hey, we're doing this today. And, or we might try this and, doing things ad hoc. It's really that people having to stand back and say, actually, we need to put a plan in place so everybody knows what we're doing and we all know what tools we're using and we all know when we need to check in and we all know if we're on track or not, because it's really hard for leaders and managers to actually know what everybody's doing if there's no plan. And so really project management has come to the fore in a lot of businesses, and many businesses don't have project managers or they don't have that expertise or skill in their business. And so at the start of COVID, everybody went, oh, all projects stop because we don't know what's happening. So I know that there was a lot of project managers going, oh my God, my project stopped, I've got no work now. We now go into the space where everyone's got a project. They're calling out for project managers at the moment because people are seeing the need, to have this organisation or this business plan to actually have their team follow, because it's all well and good to have a team and go, this is what we want to achieve, but if you don't give them the plan to follow, like a map, they're going to go off in all directions and you're not going to achieve your results. So that's really what I've been helping people to do is take, yes, we want to achieve this, to put it in a plan so that then they can implement it. So yeah, it's been really interesting journey over the last 2 years of COVID in project management world.
It's such a broad topic, and I know we've got to wrap things up, and I give everyone a final say. I know from a marketing perspective, it's been about engaging teams as much as you're engaging clients, and having that focus on marketing and communications being an internal as well as an external exercise, and being a bit more proactive in what you're doing, because you do have to think about it. Otherwise, days can go past and you realize you haven't spoken to anyone. So it's an important thing to actually get done, and as you said, those kind of engagement strategies. I know we did a team lunch last year, and everyone submitted a few songs, and one of my team members played DJ, and we all realized how much of an age gap difference there is between me and some of the other team members who hadn't heard of some of the stuff I was asking them to play. But all good fun. Pierre, certainly, there's a lot to unpack as far as from a financial perspective, but I think also in terms of bringing in people like yourself and all of us as consultants also has a more of an integrated role when it comes to that, and allows different structures, and to think about that in terms of financially as well, of the efficiencies of who you bring into your team.
Anthony, I think what one of the highlights has been as well is the fact that because remote working and that virtual side of things is a lot more accepted now, the ability to bring someone in for, like what Mel said as well, for a specific project or for a specific task has become a lot more acceptable for a lot of businesses. In the past, you go, we have to hire someone and we have to employ them and keep them busy. Whereas now, with some of the project stuff and some of the specific needs, you can say, well, we need someone for a month, or we need someone for 2 months. We want this to be achieved. So you've got to define the goal, and that makes it a lot easier. So you can bring someone in and say, we're going to do just this. That's what we want. If it works, we'll look at something else, or go, okay, well, now that we've got that, we now have to get a few other things done. So we'll push this project out a little bit. So your cost efficiencies in terms of that ability to not necessarily have to employ full-time staff, but get the consultants in, that has actually been a great help to a lot of businesses, because they've got you've got a specific project, it's got a specific goal, you get a timeline, and it gets done. And once it's finished, you can carry on and move on to the next thing. So I think from that point of view, it has been a great benefit to a lot of businesses, yes.
Yuri, final words?
Well, from my perspective, systems are different. If we're talking about production systems to, let's say, service-based business systems, they are different. Some systems where you can just set the system and anyone can do. It's just a set of very simple actions that you do. But in more complicated systems, without people engagement, the systems can be useless, because if people are not engaged, they don't understand why the system is, what is this for, and why they're doing it, even the best system in the world won't give that yield when people are engaged.
And Mel, let you have the final say. Any final tips for people who are running teams of all different sizes out there of things that they must do and must think about?
Yeah, definitely. It's about knowing yourself as a leader. So how do you lead? How do you communicate? How do you get the best out of yourself? And then knowing the people around you, whether that's your team, third parties, colleagues, peers, clients, and knowing how to communicate and getting the best out of them, and then engaging them how they like to be communicated to, and then having a plan. Like, everyone needs a map to follow. We all put in our, like, where are we going, into our Google Maps, and, off we go. In a business, if we don't have a map for people to follow, and then that could become a system, etc., then people don't know where they're going. So it's about, understanding and sharing with them where the company's going to. So, having, like you already said, about having that purpose, a common goal, understanding who you're working with, getting the best out of each other, and then having that plan to follow. I think if you get those three things kind of working, it just makes your life so much easier, and you'll be so much more successful in business.
Thanks, Mel, for joining us. And it's been a fascinating discussion. And I think the one thing that it proves as well is that if you're talking about engaging teams and getting the most out of them, it has to be across the board discussion initially. You do have to engage, finance, IT, systems, project management, marketing. All the areas of the business need to come together initially and work out a plan, and you need to keep working at it. So thank you everyone for joining us for this episode, and we look forward to having your company for another one. Keep sending your questions in, and we look forward to having you join us again in the 𝗀𝗫𝗁 C-Suite series of podcasts.